UFOs are real, burgeoning, and not going away. This is our UFO Weekly Update. I'm going to be talking about something from this book right here, On the Trail of a Nephilim. It has to do with Raman spectroscopy. I think you'll find it absolutely interesting because we are on the trail. So you say, well, what does the Nephilim have to do with UFOs? Perhaps everything. We'll get into that and so much more. But first, a word from our trusted sponsor. You probably think your 401k is safe, that it's growing, that it'll be enough for your retirement. But what if it's not? Here's the truth, folks. Your 401k was never designed to make you wealthy. It was created in a corporate boardroom to shift retirement costs and investment risks onto you. Designed to keep your money trapped, exposed to Wall Street crashes, inflation, and uncertainty you can't control. Until now. Folks, Americans are taking back control by turning to real assets like gold. Noble Gold Investments has helped thousands protect your future by converting part of their retirement savings into physical gold. Talk to Noble Gold today and learn how safe and easy it is to roll over your 401k into a tax-advantaged gold IRA without penalties or headaches. Visit noblegoldinvestments.com. That's noblegoldinvestments.com to get your free wealth protection kit, including a step-by-step guide to get started. That's noblegoldinvestments.com. It's time to get your money out of the danger zone and into something real. And folks, get rewarded for getting started. Open a qualified account at noblegoldinvestments.com, and Noble Gold will send you 2 5-ounce Silver America, the beautiful coins free. Once again, folks, noblegoldinvestments.com. The backstory on this is absolutely incredible, and as far as I know, we are the only team that's ever done this. This man, who claimed to have been by 2 female hybrids, or hybrids, as Dr. David Jacobs would call them. So he's laying in bed, minding his own business. It's the middle of the night. All of a sudden, these 2 blonde females who look more alien than human appear in his room. He can't move. One of them gets on top of him, and they have intercourse, and the second one does the same thing. Obviously, he was, and this ties into Monday's report, which we think we've already had 24,000 hits, the most chilling account I've ever heard of an encounter with what I would call a hybrid entity. And I realize some of you out there are going, well, LA, that's just really bizarre stuff, and I get that. Here's the deal. Hybrids are walking amongst us. That's the title of Dr. David Jacobs' book. They're already here. We've had too many reports like this, and they keep coming in. So Steve Colburn, who was the chief scientist for Dr. Roger Lear, and after Roger passed on, everything just sort of broke up. We've never been back in the lab. We are the only team that's ever done this analysis, as far as I know. And basically what it is this in a nutshell. So you've got, when this man woke up the next morning, his lower extremities were on fire. So he's burning. When he went to the bathroom, it was hurting to do that. So something was going on there. But before he got out of bed, he looked at his chest and he realized that there were 2 long platinum blonde hairs on his chest. It wasn't a dream. He was by 2 female hybrid entities. He had the presence of mind to collect the hair and give them to Steve Colburn. Enter the fact that we, our team, took hair samples from this guy right here, right there. We took hair samples from him. That mummy skull is that elongated skull is about 2,000 years old. So there's a graphic that's coming up here. This is all done through Raman spectroscopy. Very exact, scientific. And Steve Colburn did the report on this because we had some people pushing back and saying, well, that's just nonsense. Well, Okay, then take it up with Colburn. And that's why he wrote a very lengthy article on the Raman spectroscopy. I'll show you that's the conclusion of it. So, I mean, he put his name on the paper that he wrote, and there you have it. So it's chapter 2 in On the Trail of a Nephilim, volume 2, Raman data and its significance with the hair samples. So let me just show you here if I can. Yeah, we don't have a picture of a skull, but trust me, that is the skull that we took out, the hair samples. So if you look at the graph here, there are 4 different hair samples that we used to conduct the experiment. You've got a human, the control sample, which you can see as a blue color, sort of a light blue color, okay? Then we've got the hybrid hair. Those are the 2 hairs taken from the man who woke up the next morning, found them on his chest, and realized that what he had undergone was absolutely horrific, and had the presence of mind to keep the hair. And that is a sort of a reddish brown. That's at the top of the screen. The mummy hair is a deep blue or almost a purple, and the dyed human hair is a green. Let's walk through it. So let's go to the human hair. It comes on the left-hand side. You can see it goes up in a curve like this, and then it just abruptly falls off. Then we have the dyed hair, which just comes up like this and goes through the roof. This is where it gets interesting. And this is where I held Steve Colburn's feet to the fire. And I said, what are we looking at here? Is there any similarity between this 2,000-year-old mummy skull hair right there and the man who was by 2 female hybrid entities? He said, absolutely. Look at on the left-hand side of the graph, you've got the reddish-brown line, and then directly beneath that, you've got the deep blue or almost purple line. They come up like this. They track almost identically. And I asked him, what is the significance of this? And I'm going to see the mummy hair. This is from the book. The mummy hair and the hair from the alien hybrid being show very similar Raman spectra, indicating chemical similarities with one another, possibly similarities in amino acid contact. These 2 hair samples also show evidence of oxidative damage in the form of upshifting of the Raman hydrocarbon bands. The oxidative damage in the mummy's hair is due to its extreme age. It's about 2,000 years old, while the oxidative damage in the much younger hybrid hair must be due to exposure to oxidative chemicals or radiation. Neither of these samples shows evidence of the presence of any kind of dye, and most of the color is present in the core of the mummy's hair, as should be the case. The hybrid hair had so little natural color that dye would have been obvious. This conclusion is supported by the light microscope image obtained previously. So let me just see if there's anything else worthwhile to go into here. The bottom line is this. The hybrid hair was found by Kay Wilson in her bedroom after an alien abduction experience in which she and her husband were visited by an alien-human hybrid being. The hair was very fine and blonde, almost white. So I might have gotten my stories slightly mixed up. The bottom line is both of them, in the one that I know, the man was by the hybrid entity. It seems like these 2 hairs were, but they were definitely abducted. Look, something is going on here. And we know this for an absolute fact, that the book of Daniel tells us that their seed will mingle with the seed of men, but they will not cleave to it. But what does that mean? That's the nuts that we're looking at. And John Adam, please show this, the chart up again. We're looking at scientific proof of a direct correlation between the hybrid mummy skull, which I believe is a Nephilim skull, and our DNA rewrites history, as you may know. I mean, it just does. The DNA showed that skull was found in the the DNA originated in the Middle East. It did not come over in the Berengian land bridge. It just didn't do that. Something is going on here, and the fact is there's a correlation. So if these 2 hair samples came from Kay, they were obviously something was going on here with these hybrid entities. And of course, this hails right back to Monday's show where we interviewed the gentleman who had an encounter, and this entity, this hybrid, floated and kind of slithered down the aisle. It must have been terrifying. And then, of course, she does some of the unthinkable things like lift up her dress and expose her genitals. Why would she do this? Look, they're in a fixed state. I've already talked about that. Go back to Monday's show and check that out. So here we have, and this is why we're on the trail. This is what we do. We just don't speculate. The hairs were taken in and put under the scientific method of Raman spectroscopy. And what we discovered, show the graph again, John Adam, please, was a direct correlation between the hybrid hair and the mummy hair. Absolute correlation between the two. What's going on here, folks? What's going on? I find it absolutely astounding, and I want to thank Steve Colburn for taking the time to write that short little chapter in our book, and then also spending his time and his money to take the hairs and go through the process of Raman spectroscopy. So the naysayers will always, toot their horns and tell us why we shouldn't believe in something, but they don't have the hairs, and they didn't do the science. We did. Our team did. I want to thank Richard Shaw, the late Richard Shaw, who was our battle buddy in this. Rick and I, and along with Roger and Steve Colburn, we were really on the trail of all things that have to do with implants and abductions. So let's walk through it one more time and sort of recap here. This couple were abducted. They had an alien encounter. I believe that they were raped. Okay, and that's what the hairs were doing. And we've heard this over many, many times before. Al Matthews, in our Part 4 of the abduction theory series, he's violated. There's no doubt about this. And every other person in the abduction show, which is number 4, says exactly the same thing. They're basically raped against their will. Their seed will mingle with the seed of men, but they will not cleave to them. What does that mean? Who are they? It's not human beings. So what are we looking at? This is why it's so imperative to understand Genesis 3:15, because everything, that's the springboard to the rest of the biblical prophetic narrative. Everything flows from that. It's a seed war. It's a cosmic chess match between the dragon and his kingdom and the Most High God and his kingdom. Guess who wins? We already know what happened at Calvary. So a 2,000-year-old hair from a mummy skull, and the Raman spectroscopy, the charts, you can see it for yourself. There it is. They're almost exactly alike. And there's a 2,000-year-old difference between the hairs. Is it conclusive? No, it won't be conclusive until we can sit down and actually discuss things with a hubrid, which isn't going to happen. What it does show us is that, in my opinion, there's a direct connection between the Nephilim in antiquity and what's going on now. Remember, Jesus warns us, it will be like the days of Noah when he returns. What, pray tell, is he talking about? Mixing of the seed. Mixing of the seed. That's why it's imperative. The bottom line is, whether it's Kay's, this woman who found the 2 hairs and turned them in, or this man who was by 2 females and found the hair, it's the same deal, in my opinion. It's the same deal. Mixing of the seed. And there you have it. Anyway, folks, Part 3, we're doing the pre-sale up until Friday, and that's it. We will be getting a hard copy on Friday. Orders go out over the weekend. You've got one last shot to do it. And I would strongly suggest you get number 3. Number 4 will be out right around Thanksgiving time. Really excited about that. I'm already into the 10-minute mark of getting a timeline. And I got to tell you, it's visceral and riveting. So check that out. You can go to the pre-sale and order lamarzulli.net, lamarzulli.net. There's a bunch of different deals there. I would suggest you do that. You help us out. Keep the lights on here. Keep us doing what we're doing. Remember, we gave you the first 2 for free, number 1 and 2, and you can still watch those for free. Or if you want the hard copies, that's great too, lamarzulli.net. But if you open up a text box right below this, you will see, and scroll down a little ways, free link to the shows. So we're working on number 4. Number 3 will be delivered on Friday. We'll be shipping over the weekend. The sale will end. Now's the time to pony up. Do it. And order a couple of them. Give them to your pastor. I had someone email me a couple of days ago saying that they couldn't believe it. They went to their pastor and asked about the UFO phenomena, and their pastor kind of backed away and didn't answer. And then went to one of the head elders and did the same thing and got the same reaction. And then then the person writing goes, maybe I should find another church. Exactly. But here's the rub. Most of the churches won't discuss this. There are thousands of churches in the greater Los Angeles area. Guess how many of them L.A. Marzulli has been invited to speak at? 0. Absolutely 0. Think about that. Here we've got 22 films, 13 books. I am dedicated my life to being on the trail of the Nephilim. It's what I do. We're constantly putting out information 5 days a week. Not one church in the LA area. Not one. Does that send a message? Think about that. Does that send a message? Of course it does. Of course it does. My people perish for lack of knowledge. They will have a form of religion but deny its power. Unfortunately, that's where we are, in my opinion. And I am grieving for that, because if we're here and they show up, there will be the great falling away, the apostasia that we read about in 2 Thessalonians. Hybrids are real. There is a breeding program. It is just like the days of Noah. This one here is face-to-face with a hybrid entity. Okay, here we go. Hey, LA, I recently saw something I've never seen before. I'm 61 years old. About 2 months ago, I was driving at night. I drive a city transit with huge windows. It was dark. I was on the highway. There were no large lights around me. To my right, at about 2 o'clock position, I saw 2 bright lights in the air that looked like car lights on high beam, but it was about 150 feet off the ground. As it got closer to me, it was directly ahead of me. When it got in front of me, I could see 5 very bright lights across the front. I went directly under it. I looked up as I did and could not see the body of an airplane. I looked in my mirror after going under it, and it was not visible behind me. I don't know if it was one of our secret ships or a UFO. I live about 2.5 hours from Mount Adams, which is a pretty charged area. Have you ever heard of or seen anything like this? In my opinion, that's close encounters of a second kind. It might have been one of ours, but I don't think so. So my question to the person who wrote this in, if you didn't hear any sound, more than likely it was one of theirs, as it were. All right, this is the one, close encounters with a hybrid entity. So as in the days of Noah. So we have the report on Brett Baer last week talking about that women are becoming pregnant when they have UFO encounters. Nothing new there. Now it's changed. Ovum is taken from the woman. Sperm is taken from the men. They've changed the protocol. Dr. David Jacobs' last book, Hybrids Walking Amongst Us, is a must-read. An absolute, my copy burned in the fire, okay? It was autographed. I had a lot of books that were autographed, and I can't replace that. So I mourn for my burnt library. I wish I had some of that research material back. But anyway, let's get into this. It was approximately in September 2019 around lunchtime. I was in my work truck with another technician I was working with that day. We were in Santa Rosa Beach, Florida, at Hardee's restaurant in the drive-through line. As we approached the window, my buddy Larry handed me his payment, and I gave it to the lady at the drive-through window. She rang his meal up and handed me his card, and then proceeded to take my payment. We waited a few moments, and she handed me the drinks, then proceeded to hand me Larry's food. I gave him the bag, and he was already digging into it. I reached my hand out to take the second bag and looked at the lady, and half her face was shifting. And half her face was shifting. And half her face was shifting. Okay? It was almost like a pearl abalone shell, mirror-like looking skin, and her left eye was iridescent blue. I instantly was frozen with fear and even jumped back from the window. She instantly knew I had seen her shapeshift and saw the look of fear on my face. She even retreated from the window and covered her face as she was retreating. I instantly asked Larry if he saw what I saw. He said no, but was curious why the woman handing us the food and our payments had such a reaction. He saw her retreat quickly and thought it was odd. I didn't really go into detail with him about what I saw because I was in a management position and didn't want it to become a topic of discussion. My heart was beating so fast, I even pulled into a parking lot at the gas station next door and went inside to the bathroom to have my mini panic attack. The encounter, the encounter was unmistakable and as vivid as if it happened yesterday. I'll never forget it. Folks, how many more of these do we have to have reported across my desk? Do I have to report to you before we realize that something unprecedented is happening on the planet? It is just like the days of Noah. I am on the trail of a Nephilim in the past and in the present. So what I really like to do is the person I'm interviewing or that's coming on the record on the show is basically let them tell the story. So here's their interview. Dan, thanks so much for joining us on Supernatural Confrontations. And thank you for your boldness and your courage for coming on the record and sharing your experience. People need to hear what's going on out there because it happens to, all sorts of people in all walks of life. And you're in Kansas. So tell us what happened. Give us the backstory, please.
All right. Well, thanks for having me. And it was back in 2014, and my girlfriend had enrolled in a 21-day inpatient rehab program. And so she was, living in for the 21 days at this facility or whatnot. And she was allowed like one call a day during a certain 1 hour slot and all that stuff, which is pretty standard, I guess. And every Tuesday or so, they'd have a group meeting or a guest, meeting where, and I'd show up in support of her and whatnot. They'd spend like an hour. It was, basically like your typical meeting or whatnot. We talked around the circle and stuff like that. Nothing out of the ordinary. Well, then they had this special day planned, which was a family day, they called it. And each person was supposed to bring in at least two of their family members for an extended meeting. It was going to be like 3 hours long or something like that. Well, my girlfriend didn't have any family in the area. Her mom had just died. All her sisters lived out of state or whatnot. And I was her only guest, who showed up in support of her or whatnot. And so I show up at the facility, and she introduces me to this guy, the lead counselor of the whole thing. The guy strikes me as a little odd right off the bat. Just the way that he looked, basically. For one, he had this super thin bone structure, like he was just real skinny bone. But the guy was like ripped. He had like huge muscles as well. It was like the extreme of both ends, where he's just real thin bone, but like an Olympic athlete, muscular. And then, it struck me as odd, just looking at it. But then it was also the way that the guy was dressed. He was wearing like, some polo shirt with khaki shorts and, real ultra clean. You could tell all his clothes were perfect, not a wrinkle, not a stain or anything. And then he was wearing like high top leather logging boots or like a military style boot. The lace up in the front. Vibram sole, they were really nice boots, probably really expensive too, like a rugged outdoor boot. And, but they were polished brown leather, like polished to a shine, and there wasn't a scuff or a scratch on them. Wow. I'm a boots guy myself and an outdoors guy. So, I took notice of his boots, but noticed that they didn't have any use whatsoever on them. But it seemed like an odd style choice for, khaki shorts and a polo shirt with
That's
kind
kind of, yeah, that's a little weird for sure. Definitely weird.
so it stood out as kind of odd to me. And I'm the guy who pioneered the shorts and boots look. Yeah, and it was even odd to me. But I didn't think much of other than it was just a little weird. And the guy's hair and everything was just like perfectly styled and whatnot. You could tell it was like an obsession, that he had, like an OCD type thing. Everything was just perfect. And again, I didn't think much of it. So after we were introduced, he instructs us to go into the conference room and find a chair and remain absolutely silent throughout the whole thing, which, I'm like, all right. And so I walk into the conference room and there's no lights on. It's pitch black, basically. And there's rows of chairs that cut the room. Here, I wrote a visual aid, if I could get this up there. The room was a rectangle like that, and there was 3 sides of chairs, one against the back wall, and then 2 cutting the room like that, with a table in the center, and a single candle was the only light in the whole room. And so as I walk in, I think to myself, well, that seems a little culty, or kind of,
Sure.
this is obviously some new age, sort of facility or something. It, just struck me as weird. But so I went and found myself a seat in the corner, about up against the back wall there.
So I just want to recap real quickly. So you see this guy, he's kind of dressed a little odd, you know, so what? But then you go into this room and that's where it starts to get weird. Single candle on the desk, picking up a story from there. What happens?
All right. So I take my seat and, just sit there, do as I was instructed, remain quiet. And everyone, comes into the room, takes their seats and everything, and they start the thing. Well, my girlfriend, since she doesn't have any family with her, they send her up first. And basically, she gets up and says a few words about this or that, and then goes and sits down, and she's done. And then they, essentially really start the thing, in which they bring the patients up one by one and sit them across the table in the center from 2 of their family members, and who are also instructed to remain absolutely silent throughout, and only the patients are talking. And they're instructed to tell all the things that they've ever done to hurt, their family member, or ever done, bad while they were, on drugs or whatnot. Basically, confess everything to their family members, which, is, seemed like it, could be a legitimate medical, psychology thing, I guess. But, so they begin, and, basically it's a big, sob story. Oh, shame, guilt, humiliation type thing. And it's difficult to sit there and watch. I'm basically, thinking about how I can get through the door there and get out of this place. It's just, it's a terrible atmosphere. Everything's, just a big sorrow, whatever. It was terrible to say the least, and so I basically just got my head down, and I'm trying not to listen to any of it. I'm just trying to get through the next 3 hours, maybe 15, 20 minutes into the thing. I've got my head down, so I'm not really looking at the candlelight or anything. I'm basically just sitting there in pitch darkness. And I look up and I catch a glimpse from behind the table with the candle, and I see that guy sitting in a chair, uh, back behind the table in like right here, kind of against the wall that doesn't have any chairs along it.
Got it.
And he's just back there in complete darkness. I can only just barely see him from where I'm sitting. He's kind of moving around weird or something like that. And I'm like, what's he doing back there? What's going on? Why is he even sitting back there by himself in the middle of nowhere?
Right.
Why would you just be sitting on the side or something? And so I'm trying to see what he's doing back there or whatnot. I, put my hat down to the side kind of, and I'm blocking the candlelight from my eye, there, so I can't see anything. And I'm letting my eyes adjust to the darkness so I can, kind of see what's going on back there. And eventually they do. I can see that he's sitting there in his chair and he's just like, he's got like his arms pulled back and he's just rolling his head side to side. And, just like he's just, it was just weird. He's just like, and he's slouched way down in his chair. And I'm like, what on earth is going on? What's he doing?
Right. Very strange.
It reminded me like of a lizard, in front of the heat lamp, or like a cat in the, on the floor in front of the window with the sun shining through, just, rolling around, basking in this sun or whatnot. Except, obviously there wasn't any light. It looked like he was basking in the energy of the room, which was, just horrible energy, to even, be present in it, and I'm sitting there and I'm watching there, and I'm thinking, well, maybe he's got a kink in his neck, or maybe he's stretching out or something like that, yeah. But, it really looks to me like he's literally soaking up this negative energy. And
So let me stop you right there. You're kind of giving the guy a break. You're kind of looking at this. It's odd. He's oddly dressed. The room is weird. And now he's way away from everybody. And he slouched back in the chair and he's doing some kind of weird gyration thing. Like you say, it seems like he's soaking up the energy, but you've never seen anything like this. There's nothing in your grid system to help you, mentally. What am I looking at? Because you've never seen anything like this. So you're in, dare I use the word, you're in semi-stun mode. You're kind of like, okay, I'm not sure what's going on here. Pick up the story, then what?
he's not stopping. He doesn't stop. He's just continuing doing it. And at this point, I'm starting to get, somewhat angered by it because, and I realized the shape of the chairs in the room, and it looks like all this is by design, and I'm, starting to get a little angry, like, this can't be happening. He can't be doing that. And he's just not stopping it. He's just, doing it. And I'm, in disbelief at what I'm seeing, basically. But it dawns on me, maybe this is one of them, one of them other worldly beings or something, and that's what he's doing, soaking up negative energy. I thought to myself, well, if that is the case, then perhaps he's telepathic. I'm yelling at the guy in my mind, hey, you, as I'm below.
Okay.
And, and then the more it's not working, nothing's happening. The more angry I'm getting watching him continue to do this, and it gets to the point where I'm, really yelling at him, every insult I could think of, as loud as I could in my mind, just focusing. And, I'm really working myself up, as I'm doing it because it's not working, but the guy's still just, doing this grotesque display of whatever he's got going on, and I'm trying harder and harder. I can imagine, the blood vessels in my, head bulging, and, it got to the point where, I was even starting to see red, a pulsing red. I was really, really trying, and nothing was working. And I eventually wore myself out, basically, trying. And, so I give it up for a second or whatnot. I'm looking at it like, well, I guess the telepathy thing's not, not really working or whatnot. And I look back up and he's just still doing it even more than ever. And I just got the, enraged or whatever. And I vividly imagined, just running over there, and for some reason I had like both my hands up above my head, and I just come down and just smash this guy right in his chair. In my imagination, it was just, some split thing of just running over there and smashing him. Well, simultaneously, as I imagined myself just, smashing this creep, uh, he flips out of his chair like, like somebody had kicked him. And it was like simultaneously, he just springs out of his chair and suddenly he's looking over in my direction, and I was like, that it caught me off guard. And I was like, whoa, what, and so I did the first thing that came to mind, which was turn my attention to the center table and pretend I was listening to them, because, it was way too coincidental that all of it happened just like it did. And I thought, well, now I've done it. So basically, I turned my attention and hide, essentially, you know, the best I can explain it, and then I could, you know, feel the guy, and I'm kind of looking at him out of my peripheral vision, and I can see that he's going down the line, in that corner of the chairs from person to person, and I could feel it, like he was getting, closer to me, and and so I really lay it on thick that I'm pretending to listen to the center table, and I could literally feel the guys get to me, stop on me for a second, and jump on to the person next to me and keep going down the line. And I thought to myself, yeah, oh, wow. I said that worked. That's crazy. And and then I got to thinking, I said, well, maybe it was just complete coincidence, maybe, I'm just, it's playing into whatever's in my head. It just coincidence. And I said, well, there's only one way to find out. And so I, sat there at I was like in my head, I kind of turned my attention to him and, said inside my head, I said, you missed me. And instantly he turns and he's staring directly at like a snap of his head. He was looking like right at me and glaring, like glaring mad. And again, it caught me off guard. Like, whoa, and now the gig's up. He's this is happening, and now he knows it's me. And now what am I gonna do, basically? And so I think that I figure, well, I better do something quick. Let's go with the bluff. And so I turn and I stare directly at him. And I'm like, yeah, I see you over there. What about it? You want to you want to do something about it? Or whatever. Basically bluffing, that he doesn't want to mess with me or whatnot, talking tough telepathically or whatnot. And the guy's just staring at me, with this glare. And, and I telepathically trash talking him or whatnot. Like, come on, let's, let's do this or whatnot, which was total bluff. And he's just staring at me, and I could tell, I get the feeling that he's not sure, you know, what, what's going on, like, but who I am or what, or, how I, somehow figured him out or whatnot. And he, it goes on for like a couple of minutes. He's just staring and he's just glaring mad, like he wants to do something or whatnot. And then he just turns his head to the center of the table and never looks back at me again. But the whole time, the whole rest of the night, he's just sitting there, with this angry, pouty look on his face, no longer doing his stuff there. He's, and he's just this angry, pouty look the whole rest of the time, and never once turns and looks back at us. And thankfully, they had an intermission, which was like, after an hour and a half or something. And as soon as they called intermission, I sprung out the door and was out of there. And, I was like, that's weird or whatnot. I couldn't believe it. I was still in disbelief over what had happened. And the next day, I get the call from my girlfriend, like every day. And she tells me, she says, did you talk to somebody as you left, or, did anything happen as you left? I said, no, I, got up and went straight out the door and, to the car and left. I didn't talk to anyone or nothing. And she says, huh? She says, that's strange. They told me, they told me to tell you that it's best if you don't come to any more of the meetings. And I'm like, oh yeah, and she's like, why, why would they say something like that? And I told her, I said, I have a pretty good idea of why. I said, but I'll have to tell you, when you get out, when you're done. I didn't want to, mess with anything that she had going with or whatnot. Well, the next day after that, they tell her that you graduated early, and they threw her out of the program too. And, she's like, yeah, they just said I was good. I've graduated, and they let me off early, like a week early.
Did you ever talk to your girlfriend about him specifically? Did you ever ask her about this guy?
I have. And, strangely, she doesn't remember a whole lot about any of the program, really. It was, it was strange that she just didn't remember much about any of it. Like, there was some sort of a mental block or something. She just doesn't recall much about the whole thing. It was real weird. And I talked to her, of course, but, I didn't get much out of her.
Well, I appreciate you coming on the record. It's a very fascinating story. Thank you, Dan. Appreciate it. Thanks so much. There you have it, folks. The supernatural world is real, and it does manifest. By the way, I will be in Missouri, June 9th. It's coming up really quick. Register for that if you can by going to lamarzulli.net. Follow the links. The Seed War, The Coming Great Deception. I'll be speaking Friday night, which is the primer, where we talk about Genesis 3:15, which is the beginning of the Seed War. Saturday morning, the Fatima apparitions. Was it Mary, the Bible, or a UFO? We have a picture, which remained in the archives for almost 100 years before Jose Machado found it, published it. It clearly shows a disk-like object in the field above the apparition site. Then after that Fatima presentation, I'll be talking about crop circles, which of course is number 5 in our ongoing UFO series. So I really hope to see you there, because Saturday afternoon, I do a deep dive and we talk about how the Seed War is manifesting in modernity with the advent of the abduction phenomenon. And I think you'll find that. See, if I were to start on that on Friday night, there'd be no basis for it. That's why I've got to go slowly. So I hope to see you there at Calvary Church in Riverbend, Missouri. It's right near Cahokia. So hope to see you. Hope to see you. By the way, we have a 5-box set, which we're in the process of producing. That will be coming out fairly quickly. And more about that in days to come. Thanks so much for watching. Remember, if you have had a supernatural confrontation, please email our producer, John Adam, at supernatural@lamarzulli.net. That's supernatural@lamarzulli.net. Thanks so much for watching. Remember, there is a supernatural world that surrounds us, and sometimes it manifests to people like you and me.